"Grandpa, that lady dropped her groceries. Can we help her?" Elliot Gagnon looked up from his phone. His 7-year-old granddaughter, Zoe, was already pulling on his sleeve, pointing toward the parking lot of the Provigo on St. Catherine, where an older woman was crouched on the wet asphalt, chasing a rolling tin of soup through the slush. February in Montreal had a way of making everything harder. The sidewalks were glazed. The wind came off the St. Lawrence like something personal. The woman's cloth bag had split at the seam, and her groceries were scattered across 3 parking spaces. Elliot tucked his phone into his coat pocket and walked over. He got down on one knee, his bad one, and gathered the cans while Zoe picked up an orange that had rolled under a parked Subaru. The woman looked at him with the kind of embarrassed gratitude that people show when they've needed help and didn't want to. "Thank you," she said. "I just had the one bag and thank you." She was somewhere in her 70s, maybe older. White hair tucked under a wool toque. Her coat was clean but thin for February. She had no gloves. Elliot handed her the cans. Zoe handed her the orange with both hands, the way children offer things when they mean it. "You need a better bag," Zoe announced. The woman laughed, a real laugh. "You're absolutely right about that." Elliot had 3 reusable bags in the back of his car. He got one, loaded her groceries into it, and carried them to her bus stop 2 blocks down. The woman, her name was Vivienne, she said, Vivienne Leclerc, thanked him 3 times during those 2 blocks. She asked if Zoe was his granddaughter. He said yes. She said she had a granddaughter too, about the same age, named Sophie. He never asked her last name. He didn't ask what she did, or had done, or who she was beyond a woman at a bus stop with cold hands and a broken bag. He should have, as it turned out, because Vivienne Leclerc wasn't just any woman, and in 48 hours Elliot's daughter would need her in a way none of them could have predicted. But before any of that, you need to understand who Elliot Gagnon was. Because when he helped that woman in the parking lot, he wasn't performing kindness. He was being exactly who he had always been. Even when the world had spent the last 2 years trying to convince him he was worth nothing at all. Elliot was 53 years old. He'd spent 22 years as a licensed electrician in Verdun, the kind of neighborhood where the houses were old and the wiring was older and the work never really ended. He wasn't famous. He wasn't wealthy. He drove a 2014 Ford F-150 with one headlight that had been flickering since October, and he kept meaning to fix it and kept not getting to it because there were always other things first. His daughter, Maud Gagnon-Pellerin, was 31. She was a dental hygienist who worked 4 days a week at a clinic in Rosemont and spent the other 3 raising Zoe on her own. Maud's husband, Tyler, had left when Zoe was 4. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't ugly. He just decided he wanted a different life, and Maud wasn't in it. He moved to Calgary. He called Zoe on her birthday and sometimes Christmas. Maud didn't complain about any of this. That was the thing about Maud. She never complained. She just kept going, the way people do when stopping isn't an option. Elliot picked Zoe up from school every Tuesday and Thursday because Maud worked late those days. They had a routine. School, Provigo if they needed anything, sometimes the park if the weather allowed, dinner at Elliot's apartment on Rue de l'Église, where he would make pasta or soup or whatever he had. Zoe would draw at the kitchen table while he cooked. She drew constantly. Horses, mostly. Hundreds of horses. It was a Tuesday when they helped Vivienne in the parking lot. It was Thursday when everything came apart. Maud called at 2:17 in the afternoon. Elliot was on a job site in NDG, rewiring a kitchen for a couple who were renovating a century-old duplex. His phone buzzed in his chest pocket and he almost didn't answer it. He almost let it go to voicemail. He answered it. "Papa." Her voice was wrong, too flat. The kind of flat that means someone is working very hard to stay calm. "I need you to come to the hospital. I'm at the Montreal General." Something happened with Zoe. He was in his truck before she finished the sentence. He would not remember the drive. He would not remember parking. He would remember running through the emergency room entrance, and the smell of antiseptic, and the sound of his own breath, and a nurse asking him who he was there for, and him saying his granddaughter's name and not being able to remember, just for a moment. just for one terrible second. How to say it? Zoe. Her name is Zoe. She's 7. She's in grade 2. She draws horses. A nurse took him down a hallway to a room where Maud was sitting in a chair beside a hospital bed, holding Zoe's small hand. Zoe was awake, which was the first thing he registered, and the only thing that mattered in that instant. She was awake and looking at the ceiling, and when she heard him come in, she turned her head and said, "Père, they put a needle in my hand, and it didn't even hurt that much." Elliot sat down on the other side of the bed. He took her free hand. He looked at Maud. "She collapsed at school," Maud said. Her voice was still careful, still controlled, but her eyes were red. "In the lunchroom. Her teacher called me and I." She stopped, took a breath. "The doctors think it's her heart." The attending physician, Dr. Anand Mehta, came in 20 minutes later. He was a compact, precise man who spoke clearly and without drama, which Elliot later understood was both a professional skill and a kindness. "We've done an echocardiogram," Dr. Mehta said. "Zoe has a condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It means the muscle of her heart is thickened, abnormally so, which makes it harder for the heart to pump blood efficiently. In children, this condition can go undetected for years because symptoms are subtle. What happened today at school was a syncope episode. She fainted because her heart couldn't meet the demand her body was placing on it." "Can you fix it?" Elliot asked. "There are options. The most effective intervention for a case like Zoe's is a surgical procedure called a septal myectomy. It's a specialized open-heart surgery. Not every hospital in Canada performs it. There's a unit at the Montreal Heart Institute that does, and the lead surgeon there has one of the highest success rates in the country." "Then let's do that," Maud said immediately. Dr. Mehta paused, just briefly, and Elliot noticed. That pause meant something. "The surgery is covered under provincial health insurance for the procedure itself," he said. "But Zoe's case has some complexity. The degree of hypertrophy, her age, a few structural factors, that places it in a category requiring pre-authorization review. That process typically takes 4 to 6 weeks. Maud looked at him. 4 to 6 weeks. I understand that sounds like a long time. In the meantime, we'll manage her symptoms with medication and activity restrictions, and we'll monitor her closely. What happens if we wait 4 to 6 weeks? Dr. Mehta held her gaze. I want to be honest with you. Her case is serious. The risk of another episode, a more significant episode, increases with time. Ideally, we'd like to move forward within 2 weeks. 2 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks of review. The math was not complicated, and it was also not acceptable. After Dr. Mehta left, Maud sat very still for a moment. Then she looked at her father. What do we do? Elliot didn't answer right away. He was looking at Zoe, who had fallen asleep with her hand still in his, her drawing notebook open on the blanket beside her, a half-finished horse on the page. We figure it out, he said. That's what we do. What followed was 3 days of phone calls that Maud made from the hospital room and from her car and from the bathroom of Elliot's apartment at midnight when she didn't want Zoe to hear. First call, the provincial health insurance line. The pre-authorization process was not accelerable, she was told, except in cases of documented acute crisis. Zoe's episode qualified, technically, but the documentation still had to be reviewed, and the reviewers were backed up. Second call, the Montreal Heart Institute. A coordinator there was sympathetic and specific. The surgeon you want is Dr. Fernand Colette. He's performed over 300 of these in children, but he cannot schedule without authorization. If you can get authorization expedited, we can get you in within 10 days. Third call, a patient advocacy organization that Maud found at 2 in the morning on a website that hadn't been updated since 2019. They had a wait list. Fourth call, a private health lawyer who told Maud that she could potentially apply for an emergency injunction to force expedited review, but that it would take money she didn't have and time she didn't have either. By day 3, Maud had made 19 calls, 19 different people, 19 different versions of the same answer. The system has a process, and the process takes time, and there is nothing we can do to make time move faster. She sat at Elliot's kitchen table at 11 at night with the calls listed on a yellow legal pad, numbers scratched out, notes in the margins, circles around words like pending and waitlist and review. Elliot made her tea, set it in front of her, sat down across from her. "I have about 22,000 in savings," he said. "It's not enough for private surgery, but it's something." Maud shook her head. "Private surgical rates for this procedure start at 90,000, Papa. We're nowhere near that. I can put the truck up, Papa. I'm serious." "I know you are." She put her hand over his. "But we need a different answer. The truck isn't it." Elliot drove home that night, through streets that were empty, the way Montreal gets after midnight in February, the snow-compressed gray under the streetlights. He sat in his parking spot for a few minutes after he turned the engine off. He thought about his ex-wife, Lucy, who had died 4 years ago of breast cancer, and how she would have known what to do. She always knew what to do. She had a way of walking into a problem and finding the door. He didn't have that. He had a truck and $22,000 and a bad knee and a granddaughter with a heart that wasn't working right. He went to bed. He didn't sleep. At 6 in the morning his phone rang. He answered it half awake and a woman's voice said, "Monsieur Gagnon, I'm sorry to call so early. This is Vivienne Leclerc. You helped me in a parking lot on Tuesday." The lady with the broken bag. He sat up. "How did you get my number?" "Your granddaughter told you her name was Zoe," Vivienne said. "I heard it. And the school called the emergency contact, and the emergency contact for the school is listed on the hospital's intake form. And?" She paused. "I have a friend who works in records. I want to be transparent about that. I know it's irregular. I hope you'll let me explain." He should have been unsettled by this. He wasn't. Something in her voice was settled enough for both of them. "I heard about what happened to your granddaughter," she said. "Word travels in certain circles. And I think I may be able to help. Who are you?" Elliot asked. There was a brief pause. "I was the Deputy Minister of Health for Quebec for 11 years, Vivienne said. "I retired 14 months ago. But I still know people. And more importantly, I still know how the system works, which parts of it have flex in them and which parts don't." The silence on the line was long enough that Vivienne spoke again. "Monsieur Gagnon, I have a granddaughter named Sophie. She's 7 years old. And when I think about what your daughter is going through right now, I'd like to help. If you'll let me." Elliot was quiet for another moment. He was thinking about something Lucy used to say. She said that grace was just the word people used when they didn't have another word for what happened when someone helped you for no reason. "Yes," he said. "Please." That afternoon, Vivienne Leclerc came to Elliot's apartment. She arrived with a leather portfolio under her arm and a thermos of coffee, and the kind of focused calm that comes from decades of solving problems inside a system that was designed to resist being solved. She sat at the kitchen table where Maud had sat with the yellow legal pad the night before, and she went through the file that Maud had brought. Insurance correspondence, physician referrals, Dr. Mehta's documentation, the notes from the Heart Institute. Maud sat across from her, exhausted in a way that had moved past visible emotion into something closer to stillness. She'd slept 3 hours. She was still in yesterday's clothes. She watched this retired government official she'd never met go through her daughter's medical file with the methodical attention of someone who had made decisions like this matter. "The authorization bottleneck is here," Vivienne said, pointing to a specific form reference. "This classification puts Zoe's case in a secondary review queue. It should be in the primary queue. The distinction is technical, and it was, I suspect, a clerical error on the initial intake. Not anyone's fault, but not acceptable either." She made 2 calls from the table. She didn't raise her voice on either of them. She spoke with the specific, unhurried authority of someone who knew exactly which name to say and what to ask and how to ask it. She knew what the forms meant and which office held the actual decision and who in that office had the latitude to act. After the second call, she put her phone down and looked at Maud. "The review will be completed by tomorrow morning," she said. "And there's a note going on the file tonight flagging it for expedited consideration." Dr. Colette's office will be contacted directly. Maud stared at her. How? The error was real. I just made sure the right person saw it. I spent 3 days trying to. I know, Vivian said, and her voice was gentle. The system is not designed to be navigable from the outside. That's one of its failures, and it's one I spent years trying to address and did not address enough. I'm sorry for that. Maud pressed her hands over her eyes. Her shoulders shook once. Then she straightened up. Thank you, she said. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, Vivian said. Your father helped me carry my groceries in the February cold without being asked. That's the kind of thing that doesn't need a balance sheet. Elliot was standing in the kitchen doorway. He hadn't spoken. He looked at this woman, at the quiet competence of her, and he thought about Zoe in that hospital bed, saying the needle didn't even hurt that much. You didn't have to do this, he said. No, Vivian agreed. But your granddaughter handed me an orange with both hands. That's the kind of thing a person remembers. The surgery was scheduled for 11 days later. In those 11 days, Elliot spent every morning at the hospital with Zoe and every afternoon back at work because they still needed the money. He drove his flickering headlight truck across Montreal in the gray February mornings, and he fixed other people's electrical problems, and he came back every evening to sit beside his granddaughter and watch her draw horses. Zoe was not afraid. Or if she was, she didn't show it. She was 7 and resilient in the particular way that children are resilient when they haven't yet learned that some things are supposed to be terrifying. She asked questions about the surgery, the way she asked questions about everything. With genuine, uncomplicated curiosity. Will they stop my heart? For a little while, Maud said. A machine does the heart's job while the doctor fixes it. Zoe considered this. Like a substitute teacher. Maud laughed despite herself. Exactly like a substitute teacher. The night before the surgery, Zoe couldn't sleep. Elliot sat on the edge of her hospital bed at 9 in the evening, and she asked him to tell her a story. He wasn't a story person, he was an electrician. He fixed things. He didn't narrate things, but he told her about her grandmother Lucy, about the time Lucy drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to bring Maud home from university, because Maud was sick and homesick, and Lucy had simply decided that was not acceptable and loaded the car. About how Lucy used to hum while she cooked and never knew the full lyrics to any song but always knew the tune. About the way she smelled like cedar and dish soap. Zoe listened with her eyes half closed. Pépère, she said finally. I think Grandma Lucy would have liked the lady with the groceries. Elliot thought about that for a moment. Yeah, he said, she really would have. The surgery was 6 hours and 40 minutes. Elliot and Maud sat in the surgical waiting room on the 4th floor of the Montreal Heart Institute. The room was beige and functional. There were magazines no one read, and a television on mute and a coffee machine that made a noise like a small argument every time it dispensed. A window looked out over Rue Bélanger, which was doing what Montreal streets did in February, which was nothing very interesting, just cold air and car exhaust, and a man walking a dog who clearly did not want to be out. Maud sat with her coat across her lap and her phone in her hand even though there was no one left to call. Elliot paced. 16 steps to the window, 16 steps back. He'd always been a pacer. Lucy used to say it was his body's way of doing something when his brain had run out of options. Vivian arrived at noon with sandwiches from the deli on Rue Saint-Denis, which was not on the way from anywhere she was likely to have been, which meant she'd gone out of her way. She set them on the table by the window and sat down next to Maud, and she didn't try to make conversation. She just sat there, present, steady, like someone who understood that sometimes what people needed was not words. At 1:15, a nurse came out to say that things were progressing well. At 2:40, Dr. Fernand Colette pushed through the double doors. He was a tall man with gray temples and the deliberate movements of someone who spent his days working in very small spaces with very high stakes. He was still in his surgical cap. He looked tired and alert at the same time, which Elliot would later think was probably just what that kind of surgeon looked like. He looked at Maud. The surgery went very well, he said. We successfully removed the section of thickened muscle. Zoe's heart is working as it should. She's in recovery now, and if everything continues as expected, she'll be moved to the pediatric ward this evening." Maud made a sound that wasn't quite a word. She stood up and Elliot caught her, and they held on to each other the way people hold on when the thing they were afraid to name has been named and turned out to be survivable. "Thank you," Maud said to the surgeon, to the room, to no one and everyone. "Thank you, doctor," Colette nodded, with the quiet of someone who had delivered this particular kind of news before and understood its weight. Then he went back through the doors. In the corner, Vivian sat with her hands folded and her eyes bright, and she said nothing at all, which was exactly right. They let Maud in to see Zoe an hour later. Elliot waited in the hallway. He leaned against the wall outside the pediatric recovery room and listened to the hospital sounds. The PA system. The squeak of shoes on linoleum, the mechanical beep of monitors. And for the first time in 11 days, he felt his shoulders come down from somewhere near his ears. Vivian came to stand beside him. "She's going to be all right," she said. "She is." They stood there quietly for a moment. "I want to ask you something," Elliot said. "And you don't have to answer." Vivian looked at him. "You were deputy minister for 11 years. You could have fixed a lot of what happened to us. The wait time, the authorization error, the process that made my daughter call 19 organizations in 3 days and get nowhere. You could have fixed that from the inside." He paused. "Did you?" Vivienne was quiet for a long time, long enough that he thought she might not answer. "I tried," she said finally. "I changed some things. Not enough. The system is large and it moves slowly, and there are 100 competing pressures, and no." She stopped. "That's the bureaucrat's answer. The honest answer is that I didn't push hard enough on the right things, and families like yours fell through the gaps, and I live with that." Elliot looked at her. "I'm not accusing you, I know. But the question deserves an honest answer." She turned to face him. "What happened to Zoe? The authorization backlog? The classification error? The fact that a mother with a sick child couldn't get a clear answer from 19 separate calls? That is happening right now to other families. In this hospital, in this city, in every province, in this country. I know that because I used to be the person who received the reports about it." "So what do you do with that?" Elliot asked. Vivian looked out the window at the end of the hall, February light, pale and flat. "I have a meeting next week," she said, "with the health minister. I've been asked to consult on a patient navigation review. I've been putting it off because—" She paused. "Because retirement is comfortable and the work is hard, and I wasn't sure I had anything left to give it." She looked at him. "I think I've just reconsidered." 3 months later, the Quebec Ministry of Health launched a pilot program called Navigation Santé. It embedded patient advocates directly into surgical pre-authorization units. People whose job was to sit with families and translate the system into language that was actually usable, to catch classification errors before they became weeks-long delays, to make sure that no parent had to make 19 phone calls to get an answer that one informed person could have given them in an afternoon. Vivian was on the advisory committee. Her name wasn't in the press release. She'd specifically asked for it not to be. She said the work mattered more than the credit, and she meant it. Elliot read about the program in La Presse on a Sunday morning while Zoe ate cereal across from him at his kitchen table. She was drawing. A horse, obviously, but this one had a rider, a woman with white hair on a horse in full gallop, going somewhere. "Who's that?" Elliot asked. Zoe looked at the drawing, considering it. "It's the lady from the parking lot," she said, "but on a horse, because she's brave." Elliot looked at the drawing for a long moment. "Yeah," he said, "she really is. Zoe had her 3-month follow-up in April." Dr. Collett listened to her heart for a long time the way he always did, with a kind of focused quiet that patients either found reassuring or unnerving. Zoe found it reassuring. She sat very still and let him listen. He took the stethoscope out of his ears. "Good," he said. "Very good." Zoe grinned. "Can I run now?" "Not outside yet," he said, "but soon. Give it another few weeks. What about horses? Can I ride a horse?" Dr. Collette looked at Maud. Maud pressed her lips together, trying not to smile. "Let's put that one on the list," he said. On the drive home, Zoe fell asleep in the back seat, which she almost never did anymore. Maud drove. Elliot rode in the passenger seat and watched the city go by, the St. Lawrence catching the afternoon light through the gaps between the buildings, the old neighborhoods with their iron staircases and their 100-year-old brick, the Montreal he'd spent his whole life in and still hadn't seen all of. "She's going to be okay," Maud said. "I know," Elliot said. "I mean really okay. Not just okay for now. Actually okay." He looked at his daughter. She was gripping the steering wheel with both hands, but her face was open, the tension of the last months slowly becoming something else, relief then taking up the space where fear had been. "I know," he said again. "She is." That evening, Elliot stopped at the Provigo on St. Catherine on his way home. He needed milk and bread. He walked through the parking lot and past the bus stop where he'd carried Vivienne's groceries in February, the bench empty now, the slush long gone, the asphalt damp with April rain. He stood there for a moment longer than he needed to. He thought about Zoe handing an orange to a stranger with both hands, because that was just how Zoe gave things. He thought about Lucy, who drove 4 hours in a snowstorm without being asked. He thought about 19 phone calls and a system that was not designed to be navigated, and a woman who had spent 11 years inside that system and still found a way to help from outside it. He thought about his granddaughter's heart, which was now working the way it was supposed to, steady and strong, carrying her through every recess and every staircase, and every race she intended to run as soon as Dr. Collette gave the word. He went into the store. He got his milk and his bread. He also got a proper reusable bag, a good one, reinforced at the seams, and on the way out he left it at the customer's service desk with a note attached, for anyone who needs it. E.g., it was nothing. It was a $3 bag. It was also, in some small way, exactly the point.